Hey folks, chapter 19 really digs into this growing sense of imperialism that the United States is embracing at the latter part of the 19th century. And it really goes into detail on the Spanish American War. But there are a couple of little things that I wanted to dig into just a smidge that aren't really covered by the book. Um, as noted in the book, American politicians on this issue of invading Cuba and going to war with Spain are divided into hawks and doves. The hawks are the more militaristic, the more aggressive politicians, and the doves are the more reluctant and sort of peaceful, I guess, politicians that aren't really interested in asserting American dominance over Spain. What's kind of interesting, though, as you can imagine, they're not going to, these are politicians, so they're not at all going to have rational, logical discussions over why the United States should go to war with Spain or why the United States should not. We are going to very quickly resort to insults and name calling and even outright aggression between the parties. There were literally a couple of fist fights in Congress as we gear up for the Spanish American War. But something that I kind of find interesting is that both sides, both hawks and doves, are going to use gender as an insult when they go after each other. The Hawks, those ones that are pushing for a war with Spain, they're going to argue that the Doves are being overtly feminine. They're not embracing their masculine and aggressive nature, and they're being more feminine and cowering away from violence and stuff. It's this kind of perception of masculinity and femininity. Uh, and they're going to argue, the Hawks are also going to argue that imperialism would be very good for American masculinity. One argument is that more and more American men are not working on farms anymore. And that's true. In the late 1800s, we're seeing a massive transition of Americans away from farming as a job, working in factories. And working in factories in the late 1800s was a very difficult and very dangerous job. But a lot of people at the time are arguing that that's not as masculine as going out and breaking up the soil and planting a crop and all this stuff and pushing the plow through the ground behind oxen and stuff like that. What are you doing? You're sitting at a bench and you're grinding pieces of metal. That's not masculine. And so there's an argument that we need to embrace a little bit of this imperialism to go out and fight another country. War is good for American masculinity is some of the argument that the Hawks are making. What's kind of interesting, though, is the Doves are also going to use gender femininity as an insult against the Hawks. They're going to say, well, these Hawks, they might be being more aggressive and militaristic, and yeah, that's seen as a male trait, but the Hawks are not being logical. They're being hysterical. They're not being, sort of reserved and keeping their emotions in check, and they're embracing hysterics. Well, women embrace act hysterical at times. And so the Doves are going to argue that the Hawks themselves are not being very masculine because they're not keeping their emotions in check. They're just wanting to rush headlong into this fight with Spain, and that's not a very masculine thing to do. Men are seen as more logical and not, giving way to their emotions. And so both sides, kind of interestingly, are going to use femininity as an insult to the other side as we're gearing up for this particular war. Um, kind of stepping in, away from sort of gender ideology and arguments for and against the war. Something else that's really, really cool with this war is that this is the one of the last times, the last major time that we have a steel navy. The United States Navy at this point has transitioned fully away from wooden warships. Uh, we saw at the tail end or during the American Civil War that ironclad warships, steel warships, are infinitely better than wooden warships. Uh, and so, very quickly after the Civil War, the United States Navy fully transitions as fast as possible to steel warships and away from wood. Well, Spain hasn't done that. In the last 35 years since the American Civil War, Spain is still very happy with their wooden warships. They haven't gone up against a steel navy. And so in the Philippines, the United States Navy confronts the Spanish Navy and just basically obliterates the Spanish Navy. The Spanish Navy is destroyed completely in the this engagement in the Philippines, and so much so that the Spanish Navy is destroyed itself, and scores and scores of Spanish sailors are killed. But on the American side, Americans have one single casualty in that entire engagement. An American sailor that was serving in one of the turrets, one of the gun turrets on the ship, got heat stroke. Uh, and so you see how super, super lopsided any engagement with a steel ship versus a wooden warship is going to be. And so Spanish American War really, really signals the complete transition of the world's navies to steel. Nobody after this is going to be producing wooden warships at all. That's just no, we're not doing that at all. Every uh, navy in the entire world is going to fully transition into steel warships, and that's kind of one of those neat little sort of snippets that gets overlooked a lot, but that one's kind of cool where you have that complete transition. So I just wanted to add a little bit to the Spanish American War, the couple of things that get overlooked, the gender arguments and insults using femininity in that transition from the wooden navies to steel as a full measure. I just kind of wanted to touch on those too a little bit. So thanks.